Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to Story Time with Miss Mary, Miss Sutton. Today, I have Ella with me. She's going to listen, and we have a bunny. Today's story, we are going to be reading Peter Rabbit by Beatrice Potter. And she has a Peter Rabbit, too. All right, so gather around, children. Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dear," said old Mrs. Rabbit, one morning, "you may go out into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had a rabbit." "Yes, it is. Your father had a terrible accident. He was put into pie by Mr. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took her basket and umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 crescent bread buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were very good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was a very naughty bunny, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed underneath the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went and took some parsley. But around the end of the cucumber frame, who should meet him but Mr. McGregor? Oh no, what's going to happen? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting young cabbage, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief, stop!" Peter was so dreadfully frightened he rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten his way back to the gate. Oh no. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbage and another shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that he might have gotten away if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost, and he shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrow, who flew to him in great excitement and begged him to try to free himself. Yes, Peter cried. Mr. McGregor found a sieve, which he intended to put on the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Oh no, that was a close call.
That's not Peter Rabbit.
Who is it then?
Bunny.
Yeah, it's Peter Rabbit. See, he lost his jacket.
And he ran.
Yeah. Peter rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a watering can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Suddenly, Peter sneezed. Oh dear, oh dear. Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to catch Peter, who jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was far too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had no idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in the can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. Hey, Bun Bun.
Bun.
Does Bun Bun like the story?
Yeah.
He found a door in the wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running around, squeak, squeak, and out over the stone doorstep carrying peas and beans to her family in the woods. Peter asked her the way to get to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond. Gabby, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? A white cat was sitting at the was staring at some goldfish. He sat very, very still. But now and then, the tip of her tail twitched as if it was alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Yeah, okay. See? It's a white kitty like the white bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard a noise of, "Oh, scratch! Scratch! Scratch!" Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but soon, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeked over the top. See, he's peeking. Oh, no. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go. A long straight walk behind him, blackberry bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him in the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the woods outside the garden. Whew, that was so close. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes as a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds away. See, there goes Peter and Mr. McGregor. He is running. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand at the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes, and it was the second jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in 2 weeks. Oh dear, that's dreadful. That evening, Peter was not very well. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime, she said. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this time with Peter Rabbit. I know you couldn't see the pages really well, but I thought it would be a really fun story to do today. So I hope you enjoyed it and have a wonderful day. Bye. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Bun Bun.